Hi there, Mr. Chris here. Check out this Calvin and Hobbes Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. Calvin says, I need some help with my homework. Hobbes asks, what's the assignment? Calvin responds, I'm supposed to write a paper that presents both sides of an issue and then defends one of those arguments. Hobbes asks, what's your issue? That's the problem, Calvin says. I can't think of anything to argue. A little perplexed, Hobbes responds, that's hard to believe. To which Calvin says with frustration, I'm always right, and everybody else is always wrong. What's there to argue about? Well, I hope that so far this has not been your experience with your argumentative essay. In today's video, you will first learn how to write an introduction for your argumentative essay. Second, you will learn how to edit your first draft. Third, you will learn how to rewrite the body by incorporating your edits. And fourth, and finally, you will learn how to write the conclusion to your argumentative essay. Before we go any further, make sure you have the following items: the first draft of your argumentative paper, a pen, whiteout if possible, and a notebook. Pause the video and go get those items if you don't have them. Okay, here's how you should set up your paper. At the top left of the page, write your name. Then write middle school composition. Then write argumentative essay second draft. And then write today's date. Now, write the title of your argumentative essay, and be sure to center it on the line. Probably should have shifted this one over just a little bit to get it more centered, but that's pretty good. Okay, now we are ready to write your introduction. Let's work on writing the introduction to your argumentative essay. The purpose of your introduction is to grab your reader's attention and to tell your reader what your essay is about. This is a really important skill for you to work on. Being able to grab people's attention right away is super duper important, not only when you're writing an essay, but also when you're giving a speech or a presentation. Basically, you want to say, hey, look at me, and then immediately tell people what the point is of what you're going to say. The introduction to your argumentative essay will consist of 3 different sentences. The first 2 sentences are called your attention grabber. The last sentence is called your thesis statement. Let's work on your attention grabber. Attention grabbers start with a really interesting sentence. To write a really vivid sentence, you can do one of these 3 things. Number 1, use a surprising fact or statistic from your research. To find interesting facts or statistics, you have to do some research. You need to go online or look in a book for an interesting fact or statistic that is connected to your topic. Here's an example. Every day, at least 11 teenagers lose their lives because of texting when driving. This statistic could be found online somewhere. Number 2, invite the reader to imagine or picture a certain situation. To do this, you actually start the sentence with the word imagine or the word picture, then tell the reader what he or she should picture or imagine. Here's an example. Imagine being terrified of going to school each morning because there are bullies waiting to harass you at school. Now that's a really powerful way to start an essay. Number 3, ask a thought-provoking question. To do this, you need to ask a question that makes your readers stop and think. Here's an example. Why would anyone smoke cigarettes where others could breathe in that disgusting secondhand smoke? Now, that's an interesting question. Okay, now you need to pick one of these attention grabbers and write your own. Remember, you need to either, number one, use a surprising fact or statistic from your research. Number two, invite the reader to imagine or picture a certain situation. Or number three, ask a thought-provoking question. Pause the video until you've picked one of these options and write the first sentence of your attention grabber. Okay, now that you've written the first sentence of your attention grabber, let's write the second sentence of your attention grabber. The second sentence says just a little bit more about what you said in your first sentence. Here are a few different examples. Every day, at least 11 teenagers lose their lives because of texting when driving. These teenagers made a terrible mistake and paid the ultimate price. You see how that the second sentence in that example develops the attention grabber. Here's a second example. Imagine being terrified of going to school because each morning because there are bullies waiting to harass you at school. That's the reality for many students all across the country. Again, notice that the second sentence simply develops the idea in the attention-grabbing first sentence. Here's a third example. Why would anyone smoke cigarettes where others could breathe in that disgusting secondhand smoke? Secondhand smoke smells bad and hurts other people's lungs. Okay, now it's your turn. Pause this video until you have written the second sentence of your attention grabber. Okay, now that you've written your attention grabber, it's time to write your thesis statement. Remember, your thesis statement always gets tacked on as the very last sentence in your essay's introduction. Copy your thesis statement off your first draft. When you're copying, if you notice any mistakes or ways to improve the thesis statement, you should make those changes. Okay, pause this video until you've copied your thesis statement from your first draft to your second draft. Okay, now that you've written your introduction, you're going to set your second draft aside for a few minutes. Now you're going to edit your first draft. Editing means looking over your first draft for mistakes and for ways to make improvements. I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make some edits to your original draft. Here you can see this is my first draft, and so I'm going to work on this. And so I've got everything looks good as far as this goes. There's no editing that has to happen here in the thesis statement. So let's move on down here to the body. That's what we're worried about in this case. Okay, so middle school students should not be allowed to pick what they study in school because it would increase teacher workload. Sounds good? Every day, teachers work long hours to study the subjects they need to cover, to complete all the grading for those subjects, and to present the material in an interesting way. Okay, so actually made a marking here already. That is, I'm going to take the word "and" out and say "in interesting." I'm going to take out the word "way" and say "ways" instead. And to present the material in interesting ways. That makes more sense. Even after all that work, teachers still struggle to get all students to master those subjects. So I think it would sound better to say, still struggle to get all students to master all subjects instead of those subjects. Adding more subjects for a teacher to cover would make teaching even more difficult and would possibly lead to students learning less. And so I'm going to, oh, actually no, not possibly, but probably lead to students learning less. Okay, let's go to the second one. Middle school students should not be allowed to pick what they study in school because it would prevent students from learning subjects they don't like. Okay. It's always easier for students to study things they like. However, it's important for students to get a well-rounded education. What would happen if a student never learned how to do math? So here we've got a couple of full things to fix. What would happen if a student never learned how to do math? So why don't we do this? What would happen if, instead of saying a student, let's say, what if students never learned how to do math? And the word do is really weak, and so let's take the word do out of here and replace it with something stronger. What would happen if students never learned or never, let's just say, what would happen if students never mastered? That's a good strong word. Never mastered math. That's good. They couldn't balance their checkbook. And so here we've got they. That means a lot of people. So does everyone have the same checkbook? No. They couldn't balance their checkbooks. What else? Or pay their utility bills. It's important for students to understand all their subjects, not just the ones they like. Okay, that'll work. Okay. Next paragraph. Middle school students should not be allowed to pick what they study in school because it would cause chaos as students transition to high school. So as maybe what we should do here is just to clarify, because it would cause chaos as those students, or because it would cause chaos as, actually let's get rid of this and say they. We're talking about middle school students as they transition to high school. It's important for middle school students to be ready to earn high school credits. To do that, each middle school student needs to master middle school level math, science, English, and social studies. If middle school students would be allowed to study whatever they want, maybe we should say whatever they wanted, they would not all be ready to transition to high school at the same time. That sounds good. Oh, that's it. All right, great. So that's how you go about editing. You just work your way through and you check for any grammar mistakes, any punctuation mistakes, any capitalization mistakes, and also for any mistakes or any improvements that would make the essay sound even better. Okay, now that you've seen what that looks like, it's your turn. Take a few minutes to edit your own first draft. Okay, now that you've edited your first draft, it's time to rewrite your first draft. It's time to rewrite your first draft and write your second draft. Lay your two drafts side by side. Copy your first draft onto your second draft, but be sure to correct any mistakes and make any changes that you've marked on your first draft. Also, as you are copying things over, if you notice anything else that you could change to make your second draft better, go ahead and do it. Pause this video while you rewrite the body of your paper. Remember to double space and to indent the first sentence of each paragraph. Okay, now you are ready to write your conclusion. Your conclusion's job is to recap what you've talked about in your essay. It's very helpful when writers and speakers start by telling people what they will talk about, the introduction, then tell people what they want to say, the body, and then recap what they've said, the conclusion. This triple whammy technique makes it much easier for people to remember what you write or say. Your conclusion will have 3 sentences. The first sentence will be your thesis statement. However, you need to make a few changes. First, you will only restate the first part of your thesis statement, the part that makes the claim. You will not need to restate the second part, the part that lists the reasons. Second, to show that you are summarizing your essay, you need to start your conclusion with one of these words. Therefore, overall, undoubtedly, all in all, unquestionably, or undoubtedly. I think I may have missed one. Oh well. Here's an example of a restated thesis statement. Undoubtedly, middle school students shouldn't be allowed to choose their own subjects to study in school. This restated thesis statement says pretty much the exact same thing as my first thesis statement. However, saying it in a different way makes it more interesting to the reader. Okay, now it's your turn. Restate your thesis statement. Pause this video until you have rewritten your restated thesis statement. Okay, now that you've written your restated thesis statement, let's write the second sentence of your conclusion. The second sentence of your conclusion will consist of a 1-sentence summary of your strongest argument. I feel that my strongest argument is my third argument, so I'm going to summarize that one in 1 sentence. Middle school students all need to be ready for high school, so they all need to study the same subjects. Okay, now it's your turn. Pause this video until you have summarized your strongest argument in 1 sentence. Okay, Now you're ready to write your third and final sentence. This sentence will be one final convincing statement. Here's an example. Studying the same subjects will allow all middle school students to succeed. Okay, now it's your turn. Pause this video until you've written the third sentence in your conclusion. Okay, now that you've completed your second draft, it's time to give it a final check before submitting it. Read over it one last time for capitalization, punctuation, and grammar errors. Make any changes before submitting the paper. Pause the video while you check it over. All right, congratulations. You have written the second and final draft of your argumentative essay. I'm looking forward to seeing your final result. Mr. Chris, out.